Thousands of miles from home, the most lethal, highly disciplined military force in the ancient world simply stopped walking. They stood in the freezing rain, dropped their shields, and flatly refused their commander's orders to march another foot. That commander was a 20-something Alexander. He had never lost a single battle. Yet here, at the edge of India, his campaign collapsed. It forces us to ask, was he a brilliant visionary, or a man whose ambition consumed him because he couldn't conquer himself? To understand that collapse, you have to look at how his mind was built back in Macedonia. He was relentlessly molded by strict, brutal military tutors, and his intellect was sharpened by Aristotle, who poured lessons on logic, art, and philosophy into the young prince. The pressure to perform was constant. By age 10, Alexander successfully tamed Bucephalus, a horse so wild and massive his own father's handlers couldn't touch it. Watching the boy ride, King Philip famously declared that Macedonia was too small for him. From that moment on, Alexander's life became a literal pursuit of those larger horizons. But that future was suddenly threatened. King Philip took a new wife, a pure-blooded Macedonian woman. Because Alexander's mother was a foreigner, any new son from this marriage would immediately bump Alexander down the line of succession. The tension boiled over at a royal family wedding. As King Philip entered the theater, a disgruntled bodyguard rushed forward and stabbed the king to death. Overnight, a 20-year-old Alexander inherited a chaotic, fragile throne. He did not hesitate. To secure his crown, Alexander immediately executed his political rivals, wiped out his father's new family line, and when the Greek city of Thebes rebelled, he burned the entire settlement to the ground. These actions set an uncompromising precedent for his reign. The complete erasure of Thebes sent a clear message to the rest of Greece. In Alexander's world, dissent was met with total destruction rather than political negotiation. With Greece firmly under his heel, he marched his army of 40,000 men east to dismantle the massive Persian Empire. His first real test came at the banks of the Granicus River, facing a well-positioned Persian defense. This diagram illustrates his exact method for breaking them. Instead of matching the Persian defensive line horizontally, Alexander concentrated his cavalry into a heavy, wedge-shaped formation and drove it directly into the center of the enemy troops, shattering their structure from the inside out. His tactics scaled seamlessly to complex environments. At the coastal fortress of Halicarnassus, he spent months engineering massive siege towers and catapults to breach the towering stone walls of the city. When confronted with the Gordian knot, a legendary puzzle of ropes promising the rule of Asia to whoever untied it, Alexander didn't bother looking for the loose end. He drew his sword and slashed the knot in half. When the established rules of engagement favored his enemies, he violently rewrote them. Alexander spent the next year systematically dismantling Persian strongholds along the coast. He spent 7 months building a land bridge to reach the island fortress of Tyre, eventually massacring 8,000 people to end the siege. By the time he reached Egypt, the Persians were too exhausted to resist, and the locals welcomed him as their new pharaoh and the Son of God. This divine praise began to reshape his public identity. He minted coins exactly like this one, bearing his own profile equipped with the ram's horns of the deity Amun. He was increasingly projecting an image of his own divinity to his subjects. That image met its final obstacle at Gaugamela. Persian King Darius III massed a gigantic force, bringing elephants and scythed chariots to crush the Macedonian advance. Alexander targeted Darius directly, breaking the lines and forcing the Persian king to abandon his army. The empire collapsed, and its majestic capital, Persepolis, was looted and reduced to ash. By defeating Persia, he achieved the ultimate prize his father had envisioned. A conventional ruler would have stopped to consolidate that wealth, but driven by his belief in a boundless destiny, Alexander ordered his men to keep marching toward the eastern edge of the map. The campaign turned grueling. They fought their way through Bactria and deep into the brutal terrain of India, suffering heavy casualties to secure a victory against King Porus at the Hydaspes River. To maintain control over millions of new subjects, Alexander started wearing traditional Persian robes. In the city of Susa, he organized a mass wedding, heavily pressuring his top Macedonian generals into marrying Persian noblewomen. His veterans felt thoroughly alienated. They watched their Macedonian king prioritize foreign customs over the men who had bled for him. Exhausted, battered, and homesick, the army finally mutinied, refusing to take another step into India. Alexander was forced to turn back. He had finally hit a wall his military genius couldn't breach, the finite endurance and cultural loyalty of the soldiers keeping him in power. He returned to Babylon and unraveled. He sank into heavy alcohol abuse, grew intensely paranoid, and ordered the execution of his own generals. Then a sudden, violent fever took hold. At exactly 32 years old, he died in his bed. This map tracks his rapid campaign. In 10 years, his authority exploded from Greece, blanketed Egypt, consumed Persia, and stretched to India. At his death, the empire fractured, yet the aggressive mixture of Eastern and Western ideas stayed intact. You can literally trace that blend in artifacts carved centuries later. This Eastern depiction of the Buddha wears the heavy folds of classic Greek clothing, a direct byproduct of the Hellenistic era Alexander created. Alexander secured the title the Great with an immaculate, undefeated record on the battlefield, yet his early death serves as a sharp historical warning. He possessed the brilliance to command the known world, but completely lacked the ability to set a limit on himself.